Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. I apologize for the slightly late start. There's a we just had a big storm that came through, and there's a baby cardinal that has, I don't know, maybe been knocked out of the nest or something, but is in our garden making a very loud fuss, and we were just trying to make sure that it was going to be okay. So, Steve Sketch is incoming. I wonder if that means Steve was just like sitting around waiting for me to start. Like, I wonder that guy's late. I'm gonna have to friggin' stream extra to keep up with that guy. What's up, Lumpy? How's it going? Hope everybody's doing all right. All right, so hello everybody. I don't know. Should I wait till the inevitable raid comes in? And then do the spiel. How is everybody? Moose, good to see you, my friend. Steve, how's it going? Lumpy, what's up? Vipers, Foggage, hope you all are having a great one. You're having many human activities. Lumpy, I hope that those human activities are pleasant, peaceful, and Art of Blake is... Is that not why you are here? Art of Blake, what's going on, man? Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. I've been noticing that you've been streaming a little bit more frequently lately, and unfortunately what inevitably happens is you end up streaming right when I can't necessarily watch, or I get your little notification and I'm going to bed. But Art of Blake, thank you so much for that raid. If you all don't already know Blake, you got to go check this guy out. He is a really cool artist. Blake has a great eye for detail. He does a lot of fantasy art. He's been doing a whole bunch of commission stuff lately, big project stuff. He likes Transformers. You know, these are things that are like the good stuff to do. We've got Steve in the room. Of course, if you've been around here long enough, you've probably run into Steve Sketches. He's a great guy, also a great artist. We've also got Don Lee. What up, Don Lee? Hope that you're having a good one. Don Lee, another great artist. We are being graced by the presence of many a great artist on Twitch. So everybody should go check all these lovely people out. Give them a follow. We've got Lumpy in the room, who's the only person that I've ever seen that has literally taken the WoW out of something that I thought you couldn't do and then put it into Minecraft, which is like, that's just a video game. Oh no, you can go WoW and look at Minecraft stuff. So go follow Lumpy. Good gracious, all of the people. I am being overrun by the greatness tonight. We've got Cave Geek in the room. This guy, of course, good friend, close personal. How do I even say this? I don't let many people into my house. And Cave is one of those people. So there you go. That tells you what I think about him. Go follow Cave Geek and watch him do some amazing art stuff. Closely personal parasocial relationships, something of that nature, right, Steve? So for those of you that don't know who I am or have never been around in the channel, welcome. My name is Shane. I am a college teacher in real life. I teach history and sociology, but on stream here, what we get to do is goof off and talk history in a way that is very not academic, because we can, chase rabbits and go on tangents and do all of the stuff that we want to do. We don't have tests. It's not like we keep attendance or anything like that. So there we go. Granted, you were very disheveled and made up. Yeah. But it was worth it. Unfortunately, you have to go get running and feed the family. Yeah, absolutely, Blake. Take it easy, man. Thanks again for that raid. Take care of that baby. Do your thing, man. Cool. Sounds great. Thanks, Steve. So yeah, we talk history, and we'll get around to other stuff. We inevitably run into politics and pop culture and anime and comic books and all of that stuff too, because video games are going to get brought up at one point or another. Somebody will make a reference to something in the 80s that I'll completely miss and then go, oh crap, now I feel like an idiot. and I'll have to give my nerd card over, all that fun stuff. So, but tonight we're talking about Asia, and specifically we're going to be talking about two regions of Asia. So we're going to be talking about this region right here, which is sort of generally referred to as Southeast Asia, and we'll be talking about India at the end of the stream, or for the second half of the stream. So if this is your first time in and you don't really know what the devil's going on Thursday nights we have been doing history in chronological order. So we started all the way back when humans weren't even opposable thumbed, right? And what makes us special. And we have come all the way up through history to the 7th century of our current era, which is the year 600 to the year 700. So that's the 7th century. And because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world at a given time, we take that 100-year period of time or so, and then we look at Asia, or not Asia, we look at specific regions, right? So this phase, the 7th century phase, we've already talked about Japan, we've talked about Korea, and we talked about China, and last week we talked about Tibet and the Turkish kingdoms that are establishing themselves up here. So now we're going to do Southeast Asia and India, and on next Thursday we're going to be talking about this giant war that goes on between Rome and Persia. So it's going to be all sorts of fun stuff. If you didn't think that history was your subject, it might not be, but it also might be because, just to be real, not everybody teaches history the greatest way. Some people teach it like, Ben Stein and Ferris Bueller. So there we go. Did I say hello to everybody? Let me make sure I said hello to everybody. I think I said hello to everybody that I saw, but I don't know if I saw everybody. Cave Geek, hey, what's up, man? Nick's, good to see you. I didn't shout out Nick Slottle. Everybody go give Nick Slottle a follow. The most adorable puppy head pat emote designed by Nick Slottle. Very talented artist. Does 2.5D VTuber sculpting and art and stuff like that and animation. Very, very cool. Definitely want to give Nick's a follow. Who else did I miss? Anybody? Soup, what's up? Good to see you. Are we special? You weren't aware. Yeah. It's just the news, but really, really late. I agree. We're just 1,300-ish years late, right? You're having some trouble functioning as intended. To work properly, I need to be modded. You can do this by typing /mod Streamlabs. What the devil? No, you can do a shout out command. Whatever. What's up, Odile? Odile Lavador. I'm sorry. Is that Odila Lavador? Lavdor. Odile Lavdor. I'm not sure. I might call you Odie. Tell me how to pronounce your name so I don't sound like an idiot. I might sound like an idiot anyway, but I'm kind of used to that. Odile. There we go. Okay, cool. Gotcha. Excellent. Welcome to the Raid Train group. Third one in. Well, you wound up here, so I hope that it's worth your while. Okay, so what's going on in this region? We've talked about this region multiple times in past streams. I do try to keep all of my VODs of past episodes, so this is episode 107. So if you want to watch some of the older episodes, you should be able to go back through the VODs and watch all this stuff. If there's a particular period or location and time that we've already covered, I betcha I've talked about it. So if you're itching for some specific stuff that you want to just go back and pour over, go dig through all of that stuff and you'll have a good time. What's up, Green Herring? Good to see you. How's it going? Hope you're having a good one. Okay, so at this period of time in Southeast Asia, we've had a little bit of discussion. We've had a few groups of people that have sort of shown up and been pretty important. We've had the Funan people, who are sort of the first big Southeast Asian group that got some stuff going down here. Of course, we've got our people in what is modern-day Vietnam, especially the northern and southern regions being separated. We got a group up here called the Da Viet, who at this point were being controlled by China. So we'll talk about that in just a second. And then we've got this group that's sort of around the border right here that's called the Champa, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in just a second. But the region itself is fairly sparsely populated, and the level of organized civilization is comparatively low, right? So if you went to somewhere like China during this period of time, and you went to the capital city of, Anyang in China, they're going to have tens of thousands of people with a very high level of sophistication, very big bureaucracies, lots of taxes, and a very, very strong organized religious cults. And there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that's really, really high level. We're talking their own written language. They're making, well, they're not quite making paper that we would understand it quite yet, but it's a really high level. Now, if you move down here, it's not quite the same. There are some early kingdoms that had begun to get set up in the 400s and 500s, and especially down here on some of these larger islands, there were some emerging states that were kind of trying to get themselves on the map. But during this particular century, the 7th century, this Southeastern Asian region is really going to start making strides towards becoming a really fundamentally important part of Asian trade. And we'll talk about that as we go out through. Get to the so Champa, a group of people called the Champa. And let's talk about them. So who were the Champa? Well, that's a fair question. And luckily, I can tell you all about who they were. So if we pull up our fancy schmancy map, I love maps. If this is your first time in, you're going to see quite a few maps. All right, if we're looking at our region over here, we see this little strip of territory right here along Southeastern Asian border that is going to be between these mountains and the Pacific, and you can see Lem Op, or the Champa people. Now, it's called Lem Op, or the Kingdom of Lem Op, because this is the capital city, but the people group is the Champa, and they're typically referred to as the Kingdom of the Champa. Now, we'll talk about the Chenla and some of these Khmer people, and then we'll talk about these guys a lot down here in just a second. But, yeah, so that's where they are located. Now, the big power of the time is this guy, the Tang Dynasty in China, and you can see that they do control all the way down through northern Vietnam. What is the modern-day country of Vietnam? So the Da Viet people who lived here were already part of China, and Champa are going to be sort of in a sticky wicket kind of spot, right? Because you have this big, powerful country. What do you do if they're right next door to you? Well, unfortunately, you end up going to war with them. And in 605, there's going to be a pretty big war where China comes down to the Champa territory and it beats the crap out of them. Now, why did they even start this war in the first place? Ironically, it's because the Champa paid their tribute. And you're like, but wait. If I'm a big country, and there's a little country that I've already beaten up, and I tell them you have to pay me a certain amount of money every year, why would I then go attack them if they pay their money? Because that seems like, not an incentive to continue to pay the money, right? I'm paying you the money to not come and invade me. But here's the crazy thing about it. They demanded this tribute from the Champa, and the Champa paid it. And not only paid it, but paid it on time and paid it in gold and jewels. And China's like, this place is rich, and we don't want to just leave them. They could sit there and do their own thing and give us some of the money as tribute, or we could just go take them over, and then we would have all the money ourselves. Makes sense, right? You make no apologies for poorly timed Schwarzenegger jokes. Hey, if you see the title of the stream right here, it's Get to the Champa. So, yeah. If you've never been around, or if you haven't been around a lot, I always try to find a really horrible pun to make the stream title. Last week we were talking about the Tibetan Empire, and the title was Little Red Tibet, after Prince's hit song Little Red Corvette. When we were talking about the Black Plague, the title was Isn't It Bubonic? like, you gotta have some puns, right? You gotta have some puns. If you don't have the puns, why? Why not? And bad jokes, dad jokes, puns, and tangents are all completely acceptable. We've got some people in the chat that are top-notch punnery makers. If I had to give a gold star to the top pun maker for the last few streams, it's got to be Viper's Gratitude. We actually do have a Duke of Tangents, Vern NYC, who is really great at asking the questions that derail me for like 10 minutes. Moose has become quite good and might need to get promoted. But we've got great people here. And honestly, everybody in the chat is just super cool and laid back. I've been doing this for 2.5 years now, and I've never had to ban anybody. And I think that's awesome, right? Yes, and Lumpy brings up great questions that makes me go, well, that might be funny, but... Legume derailer. We've got some great people in the chat, and I love hanging out. By the way, in honor of Southeastern Asia, I'm having chai tonight, so I do quite like tea, and I usually drink it in my mug, and I refer to this, it's a rather large mug, if I'm just being honest, but I refer to it as a mug of appropriate size, which of course is a bit of a deep pun, or deep cut pun, on rodents of unusual size, if you know what the ROUSs are. So this is a MOAS. Cuttlefish is one of those things like chai tea or ATM machine. Yes, sort of. Yours is bigger and contains coffee. Oh, well, there we go. MOAS, yeah, mug of appropriate size. I should get that printed on a mug, like just a really big mug, and put like the adventure hat on it, and then call it a mug of appropriate size. It's an appropriate size to drink tea out of. If I'm going to have tea, I don't want some little like kind of cup. I want a cup that's got some tea in it, right? Anyway, I'm a weirdo. It's okay though. So, China invades the Champa territory, and it beats the junk out of them because they want all of the money. And this area does have quite a bit of material wealth. The mines in those mountains that we just pointed at are very productive. There is also a significant amount of trade coming through this area already from that Southeastern Asian region. So, there's contacts with people that are further sea. And this is really good for China. Now, if you've been around for the last few episodes, you'll know about how fast things can change in China. Or, maybe if you haven't, there's a big civil war in China, and one of the dynasties falls, and the Sui dynasty collapses, and then the Tang dynasty takes over. So, in the middle of all of that chaos, where there's a big civil war, the Champa are like, hey, we're going to declare independence again, and this is in 623. So they declare themselves re-independent, and they're like, okay, now, we're going to be proactive about this. Instead of waiting for the Tang dynasty to come back and conquer us, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Tang emperors, and we're going to say, here's a deal. We want you to recognize us as the lawful rulers of our territory, and as such, we will help you and swear fealty to you, but we don't want you to come back and invade us. And the Tang dynasty, having just taken over, has to do a little bit of reorganization anyway, and there's a lot of rebellions that are going on inside of China, and they go, look, okay, here's the deal, Champa. If you pay your money and you be good servants, we won't come invade you. And they're like, okay, this sounds great. And with the Tang dynasty or the larger Chinese threat out of the way, the Champa are actually going to start expanding. And they're going to expand quite a bit, both along the coastline and moving a little bit inland. They start taking some territory up into the mountains and then even just a little bit on the other side of the mountains. And this is getting them contacts with other groups of people, and specifically, this is getting them into contact with the larger Southeastern Asian trade network that is flourishing in it. Well, flourishing is the wrong word to use at this point. It will be by 700, but it is becoming a very important link. Now, when they move over, they run into these group of people right here called the Khmer. Now, if you know anything about later, burgeoning is a great word, Vipers. Thank you very much for that. The burgeoning trade empire. So if you know anything about later history of Southeast Asia, specifically the Cambodian, I guess, revolt that happened in the 1900s with a group of people called the Khmer Rouge, or if you know anything about the big temple Angkor Wat, or if you've ever heard of the Khmer Empire, you will have some idea who these Khmer people will be. At the point that we're talking about, though, the 600, 700 year window, they're not necessarily the powerhouse that they were later on. They're sort of coming into their nascent state phase. There are some cities that they kind of control, but mostly they're a people group that's living among other kingdoms. But they do have quite a bit of access to stuff, and because they're moving around a little bit, they do have some people all over the place, and we're going to start seeing notable marriages between Champa leaders and some of the big clans or big tribes of Khmer people. And this is going to be indicative of what's going to happen later on, of course, when the Khmer take over basically this entire Southeastern Asian region, and the Khmer Empire is going to be pretty big for quite a bit of time. The British are proud of you for enjoying so much tea. You told them, and they say, capital! You think you heard wrong. Did you say that they ran into a group called the Queer? No, the Khmer. Khmer. What's up, Shiggy? Good to see you, my friend. The Khmer. So we start seeing some Champa people, some of the kings recognizing that they have Khmer wives, which is a step in the right direction if you are the Khmer. Right? When you are marrying into the royal family, this means you're on the up and up, right? Now, what about religion? We know for a fact that these people are pretty strong Hindus. Now, this might be a little bit, maybe, what am I trying to say here? Maybe surprising, because this particular area today is not very Hindu. It's much more Buddhist. And you would go, well, why are they so Hindu at this point? Well, the answer is that India, for a long time, had been exporting culture. And India, when we get over there, you'll hear what's happening in India, but spoiler alert, they're pulling themselves together as well. They had fallen apart after the collapse of a really big group of people called the Guptas, who ruled pretty much all of India. And they're pulling themselves back together in some larger states, but they are pushing not only trade, but their culture down here into Southeast Asia. And we're going to start seeing lots of evidence of this. So one of the things that we know, strong Hindus, do they lift? Yeah, pretty much. They lift big bricks like this. So this is a temple complex at a place called Maison. Yeah, exactly. So there we go. So this is a Champa temple complex that we see existing around this period of time. Now, not every single building at this larger complex was built at this particular time, but the foundation of this was right around here. And these are Hindu temples that are dedicated to Hindu gods, right? Khmer, a name that looks like something made up. I'm sorry. A name that looks like something made it up by falling asleep on the keyboard. Correct. In the ancient world, cats would very frequently walk across the keyboard, and they would take this as a sign of divine inspiration, because we all know that cats in many cultures were considered to be incarnations of deities, or somehow connected to the divine themselves. So as the cat walks across the keyboard, this is actually naming your culture. That is an amazing emote. Cat derp, gotta love it. Yeah. Not really. I'm known to do silly stuff like that though, because it's just fun, right? We don't have to be all like, this isn't college. I teach college for a living. I do this for fun, right? Scully, come here, look at this. Is that like Mulder and Scully? Or is that like Scully and Hitchcock from Brooklyn Nine-Nine? Because that's a different situation. Scully and Hitchcock are a big mess. And Scully and Mulder are... Okay, X-Files reference. I like the X-Files too. Somebody just recently told me that they were rewatching the X-Files, and I can't remember who it was. And I made a pretty silly joke. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, somebody that I know is rewatching the X-Files, and I made a joke about it. Anyway, it wouldn't make sense if I couldn't tell you the story. Alas. Okay, so we know that the Chinla are doing some pretty cool stuff. We know that they are doing things that are really, really strongly tied to Hinduism, so we know that they've got the Hindu stuff on lock. Now, or Mulder and Scully, as I like to remember. Scully and Mulder? Mulder and Scully? Oh, Molly and Sculder. Ah, there we go. I honestly think that Mulder would have preferred to have the alien baby. I think he would have probably carried that alien baby to term and been the proudest father ever. I really do. I really do think that. So that's my new headcanon for Sculder. Or I don't know, Molly. Which one's which? Are you a hen do or a hen don't? Oh, goodness gracious. All right. So what else have we got going on in the region? So a few things. Now, this particular stream is going to be a little bit more disjointed than some of my other streams are because we've got a little bit of an issue here. And the issues that we have are not necessarily the worst issues in the world, but they are somewhat problematic. And that is, Southeastern Asia is not really great for preserving archaeological stuff, right? If you bury something in Egypt in the middle of the desert, it's going to dry out and it's going to stay there for a long time. If you bury something in the rainforest of Southeast Asia, it's not going to last. So a lot of the material and physical culture remains from these Southeastern Asian kingdoms are really hard to pin down. And they weren't really making a lot of coinage at this point. And in many cases, they weren't keeping their own histories. So a lot of the work that we have to do to try to figure out what's going on in this region comes from interpreting written sources that come from other places, specifically China and India. And we all know that people are biased, right? And China at this time was the most powerful empire on Earth, and everybody around them was just peons. So can we necessarily 100% trust what China says about the Chinla people or the Champa people? Can we trust any of this stuff? Kind of, but also no. So how are we interpreting this stuff? Well, we have to compare that to what we can find and what we can dig up and what they've left behind, right? So it's a little bit messy. But what we end up having to do is give overviews and then we'll kind of just move on. So we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of different people tonight. Calling chat an issue. You're not an issue. What's up, KP? Greetings from Daytona. Woo! They didn't even mention the giant robots. Now, yeah, the giant robots are hard to talk about, though, because when they show up, they just destroy everything, right? And when they shot them into the sun at the end of the season, they didn't know that they needed them back at the beginning of the OVA. Come on. That's why they... If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch Gundam Wing. Anyway, let's move a little bit further south and talk about a group of people called the Chin-La. According to an Antipodes map, you're looking at the opposite point on Earth from Daytona is in the middle of the ocean and not, unfortunately, Nitona, alas. You assume the rainforest would survive as giant robots have reduced mobility in forests. Well, the issue is that the giant robots would step on the forest, and also giant robots have laser swords and guns and bombs and stuff, and they can just, like, level the forest. So, giant robots don't really get hindered that much by forests unless they're fighting on the ground, and as we even saw in 8th MS Team that Gundams can be pretty good in the forest, so just as a statement. I really like Gundams, by the way, if you can't tell all of the stuff that's above me. By the way, this is... I don't know how many of you were hanging around when I was building the shiny Epion, but this is the shiny Epion that I've got posted up here. Oh, Shiggy. It's a giant robot from Japan. All right. Ba-dum-bum-bum. Where was I? I'm talking about things. Okay. Now, well, I guess before we go on, let me do one more thing. Let me show you this. So, one of the things that we do have from the Champa people is occasionally we'll get big inscriptions like this. That's written in stone that we can't keep. Dun dun dun. Dun 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 dun. Let me see who that was. I'm sorry, Odile. Thank you so much for that follow and welcome in. Anyway, we do occasionally get these things. These are Stela. This particular one is called the Prabhasad Dharma. Prabhasad Dharma, because we can't have just like one or two syllables. But this is at the larger temple complex of Maison, and we get a little bit of information about some of the rulers there. There's also another one here. What's interesting, though, is that the writing on these is not a native writing or native script to the region. This is script that comes from India. So they're using Indian script to write in their language, right? Yes, welcome to the adventure, Odile. All right, so we do know some of this stuff, but we don't have a lot of good sources. The whole sources thing got derailed by me talking about Gundams in the forest. But you get what I'm saying. So we don't have a lot of good sources. We have these occasional stela that will have, like, I am so-and-so, king of so-and-so, and I built this temple dedicated to this god, etc., etc. But when it comes to good histories that detail all of these people's lives and their actions, we really don't have a lot of good stuff. We have stuff that comes from China and India that is problematic because it's biased, and it's also very spotty. It's not contiguous, right? I would definitely, and incorrectly apparently, have read that as antipodes. Yeah. You probably could have said it correctly as antipodes. My predilection towards Greek is saying everything with, like, podes, like antipodes, if that were some Greek historian guy. And whose fault is that, Shane? Fault? Probably not anybody's, because these particular kingdoms were on the way up, right? They were not to the same complex level of civilization as other places had. And that's okay, right? Because let's remember, in the grand scheme of developing as an organized and centralized civilization, is different depending on where you are. Because the more difficult places to live are going to have later developing cultures, right? Just like in a movie theater, all of the good spots get taken really fast. So when humans are migrating across the earth, the big centers of culture are going to be the ones that are going to be based around the places where they showed up first, right? They decided to hang out in India for, like 10, 15,000 years before they moved on. They decided to hang out in China for 10, 15,000 years before they moved on. Southeast Asia is a very difficult terrain to live in, especially if you live close to the coastline, right? Because the monsoon season is particularly bad. The area itself is full of really squishy pockets of earth. You think that you're walking around on solid ground, and you build a temple, and it falls over and sinks into the swamp. And then you build another one, and it falls down and sinks in the swamp. And you build another one, and it burns, and it falls down and sinks into the swamp. But the fourth one, that's your inheritance. And you should know that reference. Here's a question for you. Bona fide or bona fide? So I say bona fides because it's from Latin. And fides is the word in Latin there. Also, bees. Yeah, I guess. Ants, bugs, poisonous things. Really bad climate for trying to grow certain crops. It's hard to grow crops when everything's always flooded. And at this particular period of time, especially for these people in the Chinla, it's just at this period in the 600 to 700 when they're really going to start doing wet rice cultivation. That particular tactic of growing rice in a field that's flooded was not necessarily the most ancient thing in the world. People were doing crop domestication for a long time before they figured out wet rice cultivation. It didn't get over into places like Japan until just a couple centuries before this. So if you look at Japan in like the 300s of Common Era, they weren't too far different than what the Chinla people would have been at this particular period of time. So Southeast Asia is a tough place to live, right? So they didn't settle there initially because they just moved on through. But as populations grow and technology improves, you can live in places. You come up with new tactics, new skills, new tools, and that is going to allow you to expand into new locations. And that's why India and China, which had these big river basins that flooded and made really good agricultural products that had a variety of very hospitable biomes, they're going to be settled, thousands of years before Southeast Asia is. So we can't say, oh, you dumb Southeastern Asians at this point, you don't even have, organized bureaucracies yet. How dumb are you? It's all your fault. No, it's just they didn't get there ahead of time. China had a 10,000 year head start on them, right? If you're running a race and I give you a 10,000 year head start, you're going to have cooler stuff than me too. At least I hope so, right? If you don't, well, that's on you. So, all right, who are these Chinla people? What's up with them? All right, well, at this period of time, there had been a group of, well, let's just say it this way. There had been a culture in this region that was called Funan, Funan, Funan. And they had a pretty good run of things for a couple hundred years, and then the culture shifts, and we start seeing new groups of people that we're going to refer to as Chinla. So who are these people, and what do they have going? This is actually a really difficult question to answer, and there is a lot of academic debate over this. So the biggest question is, were they a unified kingdom? Was there a central king that was king of all the Chinla territory? Initially, historians thought yes. Lately, that has sort of started faltering, because with more excavation and with more evidence, it's starting to look like what really happens in this period of time with the Chinla people is that they are sort of a conglomerate of city-states. And each city-state sort of has its own little ruling council, or perhaps a king of just this little city and its surrounding territory, or maybe a group of nobles. So this would be roughly analogous to like the classical period of Greece, where Sparta and Thebes and Corinth and Athens and all these different little Greek cities had their own governments, but they were all Greeks. So all these people are Chinla, but they all have their own little political units, if you will. And there's pretty clearly going to be some that are more powerful than others, because some of them are going to start building really, really cool stuff in their territory, like this thing. This particular structure is Sembor Prekuk. And it is a temple. It's in modern-day Cambodia. But this was built by one of the Chinla kingdoms. And it was a Hindu temple. And if we kind of look at this, if you know anything about the particular styles of architecture, this is very, very clearly influenced by Hindu architecture. So it's in fairly bad shape, but again, let's remember this has been in the middle of a rainforest for almost 2,000 years, definitely more than 1,500 years. So it's had a bit of weathering, but there would have been statues right here, and there would have probably been a scene above the door here in these bricks that might have continued all the way up. There might have been other statues here and here. But this is a pretty cool temple. It's fairly large. You can see that, this is a big doorway. This is probably 2.5, 3 meters tall, or, 9 or 10 feet. Trees are the enemy of history. Weeds. Weeds are just as bad as trees because, trees are pretty bad, but weeds are pretty bad too. We could say plants and we could meet in the middle. Plants are the enemies of history. I know that they're the enemy of the happening. Such a horrible movie. Marky Mark trying to save the world from plants. Alas. Weed is definitely the enemy of history. Maybe the enemy of political groups in history, but there have been a lot of people that have really appreciated weed in the historical world, right? Okay, so what do we have source-wise written from Chinla? Well, that's a hard question to answer, and the answer is not a lot. What we do have are some reports from Chinese officials that went there. Supposedly, there were some Chinese people that traveled down to the Chinla territory and met some king. We don't know which one. We don't know a whole bunch about what particular region they would have been in. Just we know that they claim to be Chinla. And according to the Chinese sources, these guys had big organized courts with ministers, and they were decked out in really big clothes and stuff like that. And that could have been the case, right? There were pretty clearly some of these Chinla kingdoms that were more centralized than the others. And in fact, the reason that at one point we thought that Chinla was in fact one unified country is because of reports like this, right? We had fairly verifiable Chinese sources that seemed to indicate that there was a kind of an overlord in the region. But, again, we learn more and then we kind of change our minds a little bit because we can't necessarily always figure out what's going on. Yeah, the puppy came in. Did you all see the puppy? You want to see the puppy? Let me see if I can get her up here. Hey, come see me. Come here. I don't want to see your tummy. Come here. Come and see me. Come up here. Oh, you've got to stretch first. You can see your little waggle butt. Come here. Come here. Hey, come here. Do you want to come up over here? Come here. Come on. Oh, yes, there's the puppy. Hello. Hello. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness, it's a puppy. Hello, Kaylee. Hello. What are you doing? Oh, the puppy. What are you doing? You're shedding everywhere. Oh my gosh, at the fur. I just slept in here. She sheds so badly. Where? I can't see you. I can't see you at all. You come over here. Or go back up front. Oh, that dog. That dog. What's up, Noger? Good to see you, my friend. If you don't already follow Noger, please do. He's a smart guy that talks philosophy. And I've really appreciated hanging out in Noger streams lately. It's been very beneficial to me to have challenging intellectual intercourse. So, that guy, he's a good dude. Go give him a follow and go hang out with him while he does philosophy roulette. Yeah, no problem, man. I mean it, seriously. So, Shenla. How do we know what's going on? We don't really know too much. But, here's one thing that we do know. Recently, and I mean recently as in like the last 50 years or so, it's become pretty clear that there was a fairly big war inside of the Chinla territory. And this is going to be sort of at the very end of our 7th century, so like the last from maybe about 650 to the year 700, and even maybe a little bit more into the 700s. And it looks like the fighting that's happening is going on between the Chinla people that live here along the coastline and the Chinla people that live inland. And it seems, based on the current running theory, that sometime around the end of the 7th century or the beginning of the 8th century, that this southern region kind of breaks away from this northern region. And we kind of have two Chinla kingdoms because we have a few references and texts to the forest Chinla or the water Chinla or the ocean Chinla. So it seems like there was some fighting. It probably came from things like, you know, controlling trade or access to particularly important port cities or waterways or something like that. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on here. These northern groups are probably going to have closer ties to our group over here, the Champa, especially as the Champa were expanding. Remember, they're marrying into some of these people. This sort of northern region here has a lot of those Khmer people, so that could have been part of it. Also, this part is closer to China. Now, this part down here had always been, again, pretty heavily influenced by India, but another reason this particular region might have been more interested in controlling its own destiny has to do with what's going on down here. Now, this is probably the more of the important Southeastern Asian topics for the night. Come on. Nope. Yep, there we go. Well, I'll just go ahead. The Srivijayan Empire. And this is probably one of those empires that you might not have ever heard of before. But they are really, really important. Now, one thing to say about them. Again, this region does not have the best physical archaeology. It's really hard to figure out what's always going on in this area, and especially during this particular time frame, we don't even have a lot of written evidence. We have a couple of inscriptions, like this guy. This is the Prasasti Kedukan Bukit inscription. And you're like, what the devil is that? All right, Odile, good to see you. Thanks again for the follow. Hope to see you around again. Have a great night. Dream good dreams. Sleep all of the good sleeps. The what now? Prasasti Kedukan Bukit inscription. It's a rock, and it's got some writing on it. And you're like, what the devil is this? Well, this particular thing is an inscription that talks about a king who claims to have put together a big army and a whole bunch of boats and then floated around and beat up a whole bunch of people. And that's pretty cool. Now, the thing is, this ain't so big. I mean, it's not very big at all. This is maybe like, the size of my forearm. But, oops, sorry, that's the intro. It's important because it's the first time we see something like this coming from this kind of Malaysian, Indonesian area. And I guess I should switch us over here to the map and show you the region that I'm talking about. Ba-dum-bum. All right, so here we see Srivijayan Empire. I just got my first rock published. That's great. Would you like to meet my rock? So you can see here that we're positioning ourselves on the Malay Peninsula and on the big island of Sumatra. This particular map is not as generous to them as I feel like it probably should be. By 700, I feel pretty confident in saying that the Srivijayan Empire controlled a lot of this island right here. This is the island of Java, and I'm pretty sure that especially this western part of Java, where the Kingdom of Sunda here would have been part of the larger Srivijayan Empire. Now, why is this particular place important? Well, let me show you. So, if we are in China, right here, there are a lot of people in China, and we want to trade with India, which is right here, because there's a lot of people in India. You can go overland, but Southeastern Asia, it's a rough place to go overland. It really, really is. Just look at it. There are crazy amounts of mountain ranges, right? And these are not nice mountains. These are like jungly mountains, right? It rains a lot. It's very, very difficult to move supplies through this area. It's almost not worth trying to move overland in that area. So what about putting them on boats and just sailing around the coastline? Aha! Now we have a great idea, because both India and China by this point had really decent and really reliable shipping patterns and technology. We're in China. How do I get out? Right now, don't go to China. That's the easiest way to not get stuck in China. Just don't go to China. So, if we look right here, if we're floating, let's say we're coming from the Bengali region over here, maybe the mouth of the Ganges River. We're going to float down here, and we're going to float right through this little strait right here. And this little strait of water is called the Strait of Malacca, and that is one of the most important trade conduits on Earth, and I'm not joking now, for about the next 1,000 years. About the next 1,000 years, until we really invent deep water ocean going steamships. And even then, you really still want to hold this area. Just ask the British, right? During World War II. If you control this little stretch of water, you control all sea trade from China to India and back. And that's what the Srivijayan Empire did. Real Life Lore has a video game about that strait. The Strait of Malacca? Oh, Real Life Lore has a video just about that strait. Yeah, it's a really, really important location. It really seriously is. It is a vital trade conduit. And when the Srivijayan Empire sets itself up, that's what it's trying to control. It wants to control everybody floating through that area, because if you float through that area, you're now going to have to pay them taxes. You're going to have to pay them tariffs on your goods. Of course, you're going to want to stop and trade with them because they're a fairly powerful empire in their own right. You're going to want to resupply with food and water. And to do that, you're going to have to go right through the middle of their territory. This is going to put them on the map. And the Srivijayan Empire for the next 700 years is going to become one of the most wealthy empires that nobody's probably ever heard of. You all are very intelligent people in the chat. So you may have heard something of this, but like when I'm teaching World Civ, or even when I was teaching Eastern civilizations, like I used to teach I taught a whole class on Asian civilizations, and you would think that, people would have at least heard of some of this stuff. No, it is. And one of the problems is, I know I am, but what are you? I'm a pretty smart guy. I really am. I understand this. I have a really good recall. I process things pretty quickly. I do pretty well in school. We'll just put it that way. So, I'm not going to be like, well, I'm not that bad. I'm just a guy. I don't really have imposter syndrome, at least when it comes to academic stuff. Let me start writing, and then I'll start doubting everything. So, again, why hasn't the Srivijayan Empire been more broadly talked about, wider publicized, etc., etc.? One of the reasons comes back to this archaeology thing. There was a period of time in the 1800s and 1900s when people were trying to put this stuff back together in the early days of archaeology, and they really just didn't know anything about this area. And they found stuff like that inscription that I showed you, and it's written in Pallava script, which comes from India, and they just assumed this was some guy from India, right? Or some guy from this place or that place or whatever. And it wasn't really until the early mid 1900s that people started putting this stuff back together contextually and realizing, oh no, there's a really big empire here, and they had a really big amount of influence and a really big amount of power, right? Doesn't get the joke though. Probably not. I don't always get the jokes. I was the number 1 grade 3 student in A. Well, there we go. I didn't really like 3rd grade. 3rd grade was rough for me. I didn't get along very well with my teacher. I actively rebelled against doing the classwork in 3rd grade because I thought that it was pointless and redundant. So, I actively stopped doing work, and I got some pretty bad grades, and my parents really came down really, really hard on me, and I got in massive amounts of trouble. And for about 3 months, I was basically under house arrest. And I had to write lines at home. So I would come home from school and have to write 1,000 lines a day. It was a bunch of, I thought it was stupid even then. But I don't know, man. I didn't have a good interaction with elementary school. I thought it was pointless. I didn't really like school until I got to some of the classes in high school. I liked maybe 2 classes in the entire... Well, I had a really good 2nd grade teacher. And then I had a really good 5th grade and 6th grade history teacher. Welcome to History of Shane's Childhood Trauma, stream number 1. It wasn't really a traumatic experience. I just hated my parents for making me do it because I thought it was stupid. I really thought it was just so stupid. Shane did lines at home. Yeah, lots of them. Lots of them. As a 3rd grader. The best thing that came out of 3rd grade was I read Lord of the Rings for the first time. And I've read it every year since then. I'm reading... right now, I'm reading Lord of the Rings through for the 30th time. So, Pretty cool, I guess. Or addicted? One way or the other, right? Okay, so Srivijayan Empire sets up a whole bunch of stuff. We have records of them from the Chinese dynasty that we now can put back together because we've done some good archaeological research to tie this group back together. So in 671, we know that a Tang dynasty envoy goes down there and trades with a whole bunch of these people and reports back that they have a nice big centralized government with a lot of people going around. We don't necessarily know who was in charge at that point. There were a couple of different big groups. There's another group down there called the Malayu who might have actually been in charge, but it could be actually the Srivijaya themselves that had taken over the Malayu at that point. It's a lot of sketchy, unfilled blanks. But we do know that Buddhism was flourishing in this area during this particular time, and flourishing used here correctly. I've been trying to figure out a way to use it correctly since I goofed it up the first time. We really do know that there was a lot of growth in Buddhism at this time. We have temples that were being built from the area. We have more of these inscriptions, like this one. This one's pretty neat. This is the Talaga Batu inscription. So this is again in Pallava script, which is weathered pretty badly, but you know. Fogage Green told you he doesn't get jokes. I don't get jokes either. And I don't even know if we're joking now. Like, I feel pretty lost about what I was supposed to get. So if somebody could elucidate me on what I was supposed to get, I'll laugh at it in retrospect and then feel bad about it when I get off stream. So these are snake heads, like viper hoods here with their heads and their hoods spread. And there's this big, nice inscription here that talks about some of the kings of the Srivijaya who are beating the mess out of people. It's pretty cool stuff. That's not supposed to happen yet. Lions at home. Yeah, I know. I did catch the cocaine one, yes. I did catch that one. I'm guessing Post-it rocks never took off. That's a little bit harder to get them to stick. The glue on the back of Post-it rocks has got to be really, really tough. And it turns into kind of like permanent Post-it rocks. And if you get it stuck to your hand, you're going to lose skin. It's rough. Probably don't want to get too much into that. All right, so Southeast Asia is kind of coming together. Now, let's be fair, and let me once again come back over here to our map. If we look around, we can see that there are a lot of other groups that are moving and talking and shaking. You've got people groups around over here, Thaton. Many times we've mentioned the Pew city-states, which is a group of city-states here in what is modern-day Myanmar or Burma. They're still kicking around this time. They're still doing quite a bit of trade. Of course, they're profiting from the same group of trading routes that are connecting India to China. During this period of time, there's a little bit of a debate about which one was the biggest. Might be Hainla, might be Sri Kshetra, but who knows? The archaeology here is kind of questionable. But these are pretty big cities. We've got other groups of people that are moving around, getting here into this really, really deep, hard area to live in. This, of course, is going to be influential later on as we move on. But let us move over here to India. So if we look at India, I don't particularly agree with a lot of this stuff. So the important thing for us to realize is at this particular period, there is a lot of groups in India. It is not organized. It is not unified. There are a lot of different states. Pew, pew. Yeah, exactly. Like a little laser, like pew, pew. So what about some of the important ones? Well, one of the big important ones up in the northeastern area is called the Kamarupa. And they have an area of territory that's right here. So if we look at the modern day map, This is India, Nepal, Bhutan. This little weird part right here is another part of India that connects through this little strip. This, of course, is Bangladesh right here, and this is Myanmar. So Kamarupa sits sort of right here in this Gangetic plain. So the Ganges River runs right around through here. And Kamarupa is going to be one of the larger and more important states in this northeastern region. And Kamarupa makes kind of a name for itself because what's going to end up happening is that there's going to be a lot of intermarriage between some of these smaller groups, and this is going to begin moving these smaller groups towards a more unified group. But what's going to happen around this time, especially in India, there's going to be kind of a movement in a lot of places in India towards figuring out how they're going to balance Buddhism and Hinduism. Now, Hinduism, of course, is substantially older than Buddhism. Buddhism was the newer religion that had been picked up pretty quickly, though, and it was spreading really rapidly, right? It's all the way over in Japan by this point. It's taken over most of China at this point. It's down into Southeast Asia. And, of course, it's all over, especially northern and central India. So how do we handle this? Because a lot of the big, powerful ruling families had always been Hindu, but a lot of the everyday people and some of the ruling families were Buddhist. So how do we balance the two? Total aside, but do the RTL languages have a common ancestor? Kind of, but probably not one that we could identify. So the biggest issue here is the way that you write your language has some level of importance to the way that the actual letters are. So RTL is right to left, right? So if we are writing in English, we start at this side and we write this way, right? So this is writing on the left-hand side of the paper to the right side of the paper. There are some languages that do the opposite, where you write on the right side of the paper to the left side of the paper, like this. The issue is that we can't really track all of that stuff back because a lot of them are clustered around each other. So a lot of the right to left languages are going to be sort of Semitic or Middle Eastern, like Hebrew. Hebrew is a right to left language. Urdu and Arabic are right to left languages. Well, some Arabic. Yeah, okay, anyway. There has been a lot of proposition, right? That all of these languages come from a unified ancestor and they preserve some, Farsi, Persian, right. There are a lot of these that seem to be nicely able to draw lines between each other, right? Because of their geographic proximity. The issue is some of the ancestors of these languages weren't right to left. They were left to right. So at what point can you say that they're all related if some of them come from earlier languages that weren't right to left? You get what I'm saying? I think, just imagine the opinion hat. I think that's what is most likely the case is that writing developed in a couple of different ways in a couple of different territories at the same time, And over time, the way that you wrote on the page was decided not in a direct, like, relational grouping between parent language to child language, but in things like proximity of culture. Steve, if that was Goober or Chuckles, that's actually great. I feel blessed to have been visited by the children of Steve. So let me give you an example, right? So Arabic is a fairly new language. And I say new not meaning like they made it up a week ago, but new as in, they weren't speaking Arabic 10,000 years ago, right? So Arabic, when it was a spoken language only, right? So when Arabic was just a spoken language and it decided to start writing itself down, looked at some of the languages nearby. And you have, of course, Hebrew, but you have really Farsi, the Persian language over here. So when they started writing their letters down and started making their letters, they go, oh, look, this is the way that those people do it. Why don't we just do it the same way? Right? Because Arabic is not a descended language from Hebrew. I mean, there's some similarities, but it's not, like a direct descendant. So I think that there is a fair amount of ability to distinguish right to left as a modus and not necessarily as a requirement, because we have spoken language prior to written language, and that is always going to be a more powerful force in my opinion, right? If I'm speaking it and I'm speaking words that are coming from your other language and I'm changing those words enough to be my language, I am descended from you in a linguistic tree, right? Like Spanish is descended from Latin, right? And English is descended from German, right? But that is not the same as I am Arabic and I'm speaking Arabic and I see people from Persia writing left to right or right to left. I'm sorry, writing right to left. I'm also going to right to left. That doesn't mean that Arabic is a descendant of Farsi. There are, of course, going to be some words that move around as those two languages come into contact with each other. There's almost always going to be like loan words and cognates and stuff like that, right? But it's not a direct descendant language, if that makes any sense at all. I hope that I've made sense here. If I can clarify any of that, please do let me know. I really do like linguistic history. It's a neat little niche of history that I don't think gets enough attention. Or alternatively, it gets a lot of attention by people that want to use it as a cudgel against some other people group. And those people can stuff it. So there we go. Cool. That was a great tangent. I appreciate the devil out of that tangent. All right. So Kumarupa. What's going on with them? Well, they have some alliances. They intermarry a lot. And this is actually going to make figuring out what's going on up there kind of tough. Around this period of time, there's going to be a king named Harsha. Technically, his name is Harsha Vadarna. He's part of this larger royal family called the Vadarna family, who is going to end up setting up his own little empire. Like, he's kind of going to make his own little group around this area. Have you ever heard of J.R.R. Tolkien? He created an entire language for elves, and he wrote a couple of books. Yeah, I've heard of him. I might have spent a little bit of time looking at his stuff. Maybe. Uh, I read the first 4 chapters of book 6 of Return of the King this morning. Frodo just woke up after dropping the ring off on the field of Cornwall. The last scene that I read was praise them with great praise, which is such a great scene. I am keen on Tolkien. I'm pretty keen on that guy. Anyway, so this is Harsha. Harsha Verdana. Sorry, Verdana. I put the R in the wrong place. And he's got some coinage. The guy got himself a pretty good little chunk of territory, and over the course of his life, he's going to make himself a pretty big chunk. So he's going to conquer all of this stuff, including Kamarupa over here. Or did he conquer them? That's a fun question. Did he conquer them, or did he intermarry with them and absorb their territory into his own? We really don't know. Now, this is that coin. Is it a head of a bibliac? No. So this is the heads. He's got just a really big eye and a really, really long earlobe. This is pretty clearly Buddhist influence, these big earlobes. I don't actually know what this is. I know it's got a legend, so these are letters around the side. This might be a peacock. If I had to guess, I would say it's a peacock. So here's the bill. Let me kind of zoom in over here. All right, so here's the bill, and here's the head, and here's the neck. So this is the body, and there's a leg right here. And then all of these are the big tail feathers with the eye spots on them. I'm pretty sure that this is a peacock. It would make sense because that would fit with the larger theme of the area. I'm saying instead of tails, you've got a biblically accurate angel. It's not biblically accurate, though. Anyway, so Harsha sets him up a kingdom. It's about this size. It's pretty big. It lasts maybe through his kids. Maybe before falling apart. But that's the thing about a lot of these kingdoms. They kind of pop up and then they fall apart. Over the course of this century, there are about 50 different political organizations that pop up and show up or fall apart or get conquered in India. This is one of the most difficult periods of time to study Indian history because the borders change literally by generation and sometimes by decade. And it's crazy and it's hard to follow. I know I'm not purposefully ruining it. I get the idea that it looked like it had a whole bunch of eyeballs and wings and stuff, but anyway, I apologize. I'll try not to ruin your next joke. Do or do not, there is no try. Anyway, so there's Harsha. He pops up, he does his thing for a little while. But how about some people that have a little bit of staying power? Well, the Chalukyas. All right, so the Chalukyas are going to take over a big chunk of India. So there are several regional boundaries here that are kind of important, especially this big region right here, which is referred to as the Deccan Plateau, kind of an imposing geographic feature that is going to be important in Indian history multiple times. Isn't that the way these venture dynasties work? Some super charismatic huckster pops up and makes a great looking kingdom, and it all falls apart as soon as the investors try to cash in. So you're saying that the Harsha, the kingdom that Harsha set up was just a big Ponzi scheme? Maybe so. Maybe so. Maybe he was just fooling everybody that he could control all this territory. Well, I mean, he pretty clearly could. And it probably lasted through at least one of his sons. before it all fell apart. But, I mean, what would have been funnier, or perhaps more of a huckster thing to do, was to tell everybody that you were going to take over all of these countries, and then get everybody excited that you were going to take over these countries, and then when you started taking over the countries, you sent a letter to the existing rulers and told them, I'm not going to take over your country until you tell me how many Buddhists live there. And those kingdoms are like, dude, we don't keep census records the same way. We can't, I mean, we can estimate how many Buddhists we have. And then you go, I'm not taking over your country unless you tell me how many Buddhists are there. I know that I agreed to do it. And I know that I've got a whole bunch of people that are going to offer me military support to come take over your country. But until you tell me how many Buddhists are there, I just can't take it over in good faith. And then you have to like sue them in the High Court of India. And, it's just a big mess. You hire a bunch of actors to dress up like impressive soldiers, a few elephants and some loud criers, and you travel around as the emperor of some country over there far away. Yeah, right? And you're visiting a bunch of heads of state, getting gifts and promising all sorts of stuff. And then you disappear before anybody realizes the whole thing is fiction. That would actually be amazing. That would be great. If you could just, hire your own personal bodyguard and tell everybody that you were the emperor of the state that didn't exist, that would be awesome. That would be really fun. Like Aladdin, kind of sort of like Aladdin. Of course, he had a genie, and Cave is basically expecting to just get really high charisma rolls. And just live off inspiration, right? So who are the Chalukyas? Okay, so we've actually talked about them before. Last time we talked about India, we mentioned these particular people. They were already an established power during the time of the Guptas. Again, the Gupta dynasty and the Gupta Empire had been the most powerful dynasty and empire that India had ever seen. And at this point in history, this is about 200 years after the Gupta Empire had fallen apart, which is why we have all these little bitty groups. But the Chalukyas had already been an important part of India prior to that, and they're going to be in a lot of different conflicts with other smaller groups like the Pallavas, the Satavahanas, and they're going to come out the other side feeling pretty powerful, and they're in a pretty good spot. And by the middle part of our 7th century that we're talking about, they're going to regain their own independence. They're going to have a war with the Pallava dynasty, who was sort of declining and falling out at that point. And the Chalukyas are going to begin to expand and take over territory of their own. And by the time we're at 700, the end of our period of time that we're talking about, these guys are going to be the most powerful Indian nation. And again, let me sort of point this out here on the map. If we're just looking at India and we're just looking at geography, so try to look kind of at the negative space, right? You can even sort of see where the natural boundaries of their territory was, right? So you can see that there's a big geographic cut right here, and then there's this sort of larger plateau that moves right around here. This is going to be the area that they take over, and it's nicely insulated from outside invasion because of the geographic features that they're using for their own defense. And they're also going to be able to use this towards a lot of benefit, especially with these cities along the coastline, because they're going to start pushing that trade stuff. And trade is really going to be on the way up in this period of time. All right. So I mentioned back when we were talking about Kumarupa and Harsha, and I'll mention it again here, that we're trying to figure out how to handle the sort of fusion or syncretism or overlap between Buddhism and Hinduism. Now, up in the northeast, when we were just talking about Harsha and the empire of Harsha and Kumarupa, they were pretty open. And while the rulers were almost always going to be Hindu, they were fairly open. But Chalukya is going to be a little bit different, and they're going to start really emphasizing Hinduism. And this is going to start a period of time in this 7th century that continues into the 8th century, where especially people in Central and southern India are going to really kind of start backing away from Buddhism. They're going to start refocusing on Hinduism, and this is going to be a combination of a lot of different factors, both political, economic, and religious factors. But the Chalukyas are going to go all in on the Hindu stuff. This is a great idea for a D&D party. That would be a fun D&D campaign. Where like everybody's a bard and everybody uses strength as their dump stat. And they just, they just go really, really heavy on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And try to fake their way through everything. That could be great. That could be really great. All right, so let me show you this. This is a piece of Chalukya art. So this is at a place called Badami. And this particular location is a really nice region of deep walled valleys. So you have these kind of natural fissures in the rock that allow you to do this really cool artwork. So this is actually carved out of the side of a mountain. So it was naturally a cave, and the Chalukya artisans came in and cut the face of the cave out and made these great pillars with all this great decoration. And then on the wall of the cave, they made this really cool statue here of Vishnu. So all of this stuff is literally like right into the rock. And this would definitely be one of the places that I would want to go were I to ever be able to visit India. I'd love to go to Badami and see all of the temple caves there. But again, this is going to be some of the evidence, that these people were really getting big on the larger idea of Hinduism. You don't see money coming from the throne to prop up Buddhism. Now, if we go back in time, like if you start looking at like the Guptas. The Guptas had people that were Hindu but supported Buddhism, right? They would pay to build shrines and stupas and all this cool stuff for Buddhist groups, monasteries and temples, etc. But when the money starts shifting and you start seeing the kings not being willing to spend money to support Buddhist outgroups anymore or works anymore, we can start taking this as a sign of them maybe not being as tolerant of Buddhism overall. And there are a lot of religious innovations at this time within Hinduism. Necessarily going into the fine details of those is really difficult to do without trying to rehash all of what Hindus believe. But there's a particular branch of Hinduism that really gets kind of finalized and stylized at this time. It's called Mimamsa. It's one of the larger Hindu, I guess the right word is denominations. But I don't even really like that word. Hinduism is a horrible name for the religion. There are a lot of different religions that all get called Hinduism, and hopefully we can get rid of that term eventually. Hindu art really shows up the Christians and their two sticks, right? A heist, fake it till you take it, indeed. That would be a fun party. I'd be interested in playing that and seeing how far we could get with it. We might, TPK like 5 minutes in, but it would be fun for those 5 minutes. All right, what about northwest India? What about a little bit up this way? Now, if you were with us last week, we talked about this area in India a little bit, but let's talk about it specifically in relationship to the people that were ruling there. Now, this area of northwest India, right around in here, especially in the modern day region of what would be Kashmir. So if I throw on our borders and we look at the giant mess of lines up here that is supposed to be where Kashmir is, This region is what we're talking about. So this is in modern day Pakistan, India, China, sort of this region right here. This is where the Karkota dynasty is going to have their territory. Now, yes, I talk about them a little bit because I'm a big fan of Kashmiri history, and that's sort of one of my pet areas, but they actually were very important. And one of the reasons they're particularly important is because this area had been kind of trampled for a long time. This northwestern region of India is almost always the first part of India to get invaded. If you're going to invade India and you're an ancient empire or power group, you're probably going to try to invade right here. This region is the Khyber Pass that connects sort of the larger Central Asian plateau to the the Indus River Valley. This region gets beat to heck in the ancient world. And under previous rule, if we go back to the last 100 years, this region had been under the control of a group of people that were called the Kitterites or the Alkan Huns. So the Huns had control of this northern region. The Karkota dynasty is going to be basically the first group that kind of pops out and pushes the Huns away. And this is going to be pretty important because what's going to end up happening in this area is kind of an interesting refuge for Buddhists, where other parts of India are going to transition much more towards Hinduism and not be as tolerant of Buddhists. This little pocket up here, I mean, the rulers are still going to be very much Hindu, but they're going to be very tolerant of Buddhists. And part of the reason has to do with the general makeup of the ethnic groups in this area. Because of all of those invasions, right? This area had been invaded by the Greeks and the Persians and the Kushans and the Scythians and the Yuezhi, who were northern Chinese barbarian people that had been pushed over into the region. And the other types of Persians, not just the Parthians, but the Sassanids. And then they had been invaded by the Huns, and they're about to get invaded by the Turks. This area had a lot of different kinds of people. So there had been a Buddhist presence in that area going way back into the BC time period, and they're just going to kind of let it be. Here's a pretty interesting coin from that region. I'll let Vipers describe what he sees in these coins. It can kind of be like a Rorschach test here. And the letter B. So there's a particular king of the Karkata dynasty that's called Durlaba. And this is the coin of King Durlaba. So, interesting stuff. This is pretty clearly a UFO, a slug making babies / Guardians of the Galaxy 4. Okay, I'll take it. So this is the slug making babies, and this is a movie poster for Guardians of the Galaxy 4. Sounds good. I'll accept it. Clearly a Demigorgon. I could see it. Anyway, so we've got a kingdom that's up there. They're Hindu, but they're tolerating Buddhists, and they're going to have to deal with the Turks. The Western Go-Turk Empire, when it falls apart, is going to send people down into Central Asia, including a group of people that are referred to as the Shahis. And the Shahis at the very end of the 700s are going to invade, guess what, this very northern little piece of territory. And they're going to run right into the Karkotas and make an interesting little war amongst themselves. By the way, the Turks end up winning. Definitely a UFO on the second one. Yeah, I see that one too. green herring, and this is obviously UFO evidence. I had a really sad. This is kind of making me sad again. The TV show Ancient Aliens is currently airing its 18th season. That just, it hurts. It hurts. It hurts really badly. Like, why? Why do we need 18 seasons of that hot garbage? I guess because people keep watching it, right? Okay, so I know that we've talked about a lot of different groups of people. So before we end, let's take a little bit of a step back. And you've noticed that I've zoomed the globe out here. Let's actually take a step back and examine what we're talking about here and get a little bit more of an overview. Okay, so what we're seeing in both of these places, in Southeast Asia and in India, is a very wide, disparate group of political entities becoming more consolidated. So in Southeast Asia, we go from a lot of different small groups to a few larger groups. And especially down here in Indonesia, Malaysia area with the Srivijaya, we see the birth of a new empire, the collection of a lot of different small groups put it together into a one much more powerful empire. Same thing going on over here in India. We've got like 40 different groups, but then we end up with a larger group up here in the northwest, and we've got the Chalukyas who are dominating basically all of central India, and we've got bigger groups up here that are consolidating and becoming more powerful. And we have to ask ourselves, what is making this happen? Is it a natural thing where countries will unify and then they'll fall apart, and then they'll unify again and they'll fall apart? Absolutely, that's part of it. But another part of it is the money. Trade between India and China during the 7th century is going to be an increasingly important part of both of these regions' stability, right? If you're making a ton of money, it's easier to run your country. And when the Tang Dynasty finally gets China pacified and stabilized, it's going to make a ton of it. And it doesn't want to trade with 13 groups in Southeast Asia and 40 groups in India. It wants to trade with a few people that can be reliable, that they can count on, that they know that they can deal with. And this actually has kind of like a gravimetric force, right? And we see the same thing sort of happen over here with barbarian groups around the borders of Rome when Rome was still around. You have these really wide, disparate groups show up on the border, and Rome goes, I don't want to talk with you. I want to talk with one of your groups. And then that group becomes powerful and start taking over the other ones. And they form conglomerates of larger independent groups. This is the same thing that's happening in India and Southeast Asia. As the money starts moving, the people that can access that money and harness that economic power are going to be able to pull themselves together. They're going to have more money to pay troops. They're going to have more money to fuel things like public works. They're going to have more money to do stuff like support their religious ideologies. And that's why, especially over here in India, you're going to starting to see changes in the religion. And especially because the rulers in India had pretty typically always been Hindus, you're going to start seeing Hinduism slowly start to push out Buddhism. And a lot of this has to do with, again, the centralizing power, the fact that I don't necessarily have to appease the population as much because I can afford to have a really big army, so I don't necessarily have to tolerate Buddhism anymore. If I'm going to spend money on big, cool temples, I'm going to build Hindu stuff, right? So all of this is connected. And the 7th century is laying the groundwork for what goes to be the biggest trade network in the world. And people, when they think about big trade networks, they think about stuff like the Silk Road, right? And I'm not taking anything away from the Silk Road. At this point, it was the biggest trade network in the world. But in just a couple hundred years, the Indian Ocean is going to be the most important body of water on Earth. And it will remain that way for centuries. By the time we get to the 800s, there is more trade moving from Africa to India to Southeast Asia to China than there is moving from China across on the Silk Road on land. And the Indian Ocean is going to supplant the land trade routes within a couple hundred years. But that movement starts at this time. So we're kind of laying a foundation that is going to be not just a firm foundation, but something that's like an on-ramp to success that's going to come later down the road. Just because you can't attempt it doesn't mean it's not true. That's true. The aliens are bringing them together. Correct. Embrace the truth that's out there. Right. The aliens are showing up and talking to these rulers and revealing to them the gnosis, the hidden truths of the world, the sacred geometries and all of that stuff. And those rulers are using their wisdom and knowledge to bring the world together. Oh, good gracious. East India Company, anybody? Yeah, I mean... But what... Okay, I'm glad you actually brought up the East India Company. The Dutch East India Company and the British India Companies. A lot of people, when they take World Civ, they learn about these gigantic trade empires that the Europeans set up in Asia. The Europeans didn't set that junk up. What happens is the Europeans showed up, they found the networks that were already there, and then they shot everybody with cannons. Because it turns out that when you have guns, you can kill people without guns really easy. But the larger idea that the British sort of set up this great trade empire, that's some bullcrap. It was already there. They just took it over. The same thing with the Dutch. When the Dutch get to Southeast Asia over here, they're just literally taking over the trade routes that had existed 1,000 years, right? When they set up their little capital for the Dutch East India Company on one of these little islands right here, they're doing that to watch the Strait of Malacca and to watch the island of Java, because they figured out where the trade was and then they just took it over. It always sort of irks me when people are like, and Vasco da Gama discovered India. Like, please. The Muslim traders in Africa had been trading from Africa to Saudi Arabia to India for 300 years before Vasco da Gama figured out where India was, right? It's not like he discovered anything. He really didn't. Like, oh crap, what's that? Like, I think that's India. Oh, bother. No. They just followed all of the other people. For real. Anyway, that's Shane Ruin's European-centric history 101. But I hope that I do that all the time, because Eurocentric history is a thing, and I'm not trying to say that Europe isn't important. It's just not as important as I think it is. Wait till we get to Song Dynasty China, and I tell you that people in Asia invented basically everything that the Renaissance claims about 500 years before the Renaissance did it. Like, China has printing press hundreds of years before Gutenberg does. But we've actually talked about that before, because we talked about that when we did the history of bookbinding. Europe didn't discover the rest of the world. The aliens discovered it way before that. Absolutely. And they fed this like telepathically to all of their followers, right? It's the aliens. It all comes back to the aliens. All right, ladies and gents. That is all for me for the night on my material. Oh, were all the point redemptions deleted? No, they weren't. I just turned them off. Let me go turn them back on. So when I do History of Middle Earth, I turn all of those off because History of Middle Earth streams tend to go really long. All right, all point redemption should be back on now. Point redemption. Shane is ho ho ho. Cave Geek is just like, get on with it. I'm done. I'm done. Oh. Is that retroactive because you were trying to get me to get on with it in the History of Middle Earth stream? So you're making sure that you redeem the get on with it that you sent me in text. I appreciate the honesty. You borrowed against future redemptions. Moose says, what's in the news? All right, Moose, did you want something specific or did you just want me to ramble? Nick says, what's in the news? What is the most important? Oh, that's fine. We can do two of them. What is the most important stuff to not miss? Ooh, that's a great question. So what's going on in the world that's really important that you shouldn't miss? And that's making me... That's making my brain itch. Because I'm trying to think of like what's important, but stuff that hasn't been talked about or hasn't been covered enough. There's a ceasefire. There's a ceasefire going on right now in the Gaza Strip. Last week and the earlier part of this week, Israel had been fairly consistently shelling particular targets inside of the Gaza Strip, targeting what they said were Islamic State or Islamic radical terrorists. Now, anytime there is trouble between Palestinians and Israelis, it could boil over really big, really, really fast, right? But this one appeared to be a little bit different. And the reason it looked a little bit different is mostly because Hamas basically stayed out of the whole thing. So Hamas is a political slash, well, can I call them a terrorist organization? Yeah, I think I can, because they pretty clearly both support and fund terrorism and have people that are terrorists that, anyway, yeah, Hamas is a terrorist organization. So, but they got themselves elected into government, right? So they are a legitimate government in the Gaza Strip. So they're a government and a terrorist organization. Anyway, so when the strikes in Israel happened that Israel was retaliating against, Hamas basically stood back and let it go. And this was a really interesting moment because usually anytime anything happens in Gaza or the West Bank, Hamas is all over it. But they didn't. Now, there were actually things for Hamas to gripe about. For example, in the strikes, Israel killed children. Like, one of them was a 6-year-old girl that died. And this is stuff that Hamas would normally have been all over, like blowing up on the news and, you know, trying to expose as human rights violations. And I'm not trying to, like, justify Israel in doing so. Nobody should ever kill children. It's a bad thing to do. So I'm not trying to, like, let Israel off the hook here or anything. But what's really interesting is the fact that all of this happened and there's a ceasefire that's taken place and there hasn't been any violence in the last couple of days. But Hamas sat it out. And I don't know why. And I'm wondering exactly who these particular people were that Israel was targeting, and I'm wondering exactly what they meant to Hamas, and I'm that's one thing that I'm monitoring. because it's going to be really interesting to see if we get any more information about who specifically they were targeting and why. And specifically why Hamas isn't really making a big deal about this one. So that's an interesting thing that we missed. Nix, did you have any particular thing that you wanted me to talk about? For what's in the news? We can do as many of those as you all want to redeem them, by the way. What's up, Paladin? Good to see you. Hope you're having a good one. Welcome on in. Please feel free to ask questions if you want. We're actually wrapping up. But the wrapping up phase can take sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes. Because we end up running our mouth a lot. What ends up happening is we'll have a whole bunch of channel redemptions, a whole bunch of weird stuff like that. Okay. 20 subs if you can tell me the southern point of the USA. The southern point of the USA. You mean like the point that is the furthest south? Because that's in Texas, and a lot of people think it's Florida, but it's actually Texas, because Texas, like, it is. A lot of people think that it's Key West too, but it's like if we, where's my map? So if we put our borders and labels on, and we get down here to Key West, like if we draw a straight line, nope, that's the wrong. Here we go. Right, so if we find this little part in here in Texas and go straight across, Texas is actually the southernmost point on the continental states. Now, I mean, whether or not we're going to talk about Key West, that's one thing or another thing, but I think this is one of those... Ooh, crud, I wasn't supposed to do that. And Hawaii has some stuff that actually goes across the equator, I believe, right? No, it doesn't go across the equator. Hawaii's right here. I don't know. American Samoa. Ah, so we're just... Oh, yeah, because Samoa's way down here. You got me. Got me with the territories. Did I have my borders upstairs? Yeah, so down here in American Samoa. That's a fair question. A fair cop. How about that? Well done, sir. Well done. Or ma'am. I don't know if you're sir or ma'am. American Samoa. Didn't even think about American Samoa. That's my fault. And I should, because they are American citizens. Don't have a lot of the same legal structures, though, unfortunately. Okay. Key West is further south than that? Okay, cool. I'll trust you, Nix. I am clearly fallible. Okay, so you want to talk about the FBI thing. All right. Okay. Yeah, they can't... they don't have the right to vote in presidential elections. They can vote in primaries, which is really interesting. So when the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and the Libertarian Party and all the other parties are picking their candidate... American Samoa and Guam and Puerto Rico, they do get to vote in those political party primaries, but they can't vote in the national election. They also don't have senators or representatives. What they have is someone that can go to the House of Representatives, that can introduce legislation, and they can speak on the floor of the House, but they don't have voting privileges in the House. This is similar to Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, I felt like there's another place that I needed to say. Oh, D.C. Sorry, D.C. Sorry, D.C. people. I did not mean to forget you. So we were talking about Asia, specifically Southeast Asia over here and India in the 7th century current era. We did that for a couple hours. So let's talk about the FB. Dun 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 dun. Paladin, thank you so much for that follow, and welcome to the stream. being revisited by the puppy, who is moist, meaning that she went outside when it was raining. Oh, puppy, you rotten thing. Do you want to come up here? You want to come see me? Get a second puppy visit? Come here. Come on. Come on. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. There we go. There's the puppy. You rotten thing. I just wanted to say hello, I guess. Okay, so earlier this week, the FBI conducted a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. Mar-a-Lago, of course, is the resort / residence where President Trump currently lives. This particular warrant is dealing with the possession of certain classified documents that the Trump administration and perhaps even President Trump himself took with him when he left office. Now, background. Going all the way back to a long time ago, especially important for things like Richard Nixon, there has been legislation that states that all documents produced by the president have to be cleared through the National Archives prior to being released to the president, right? So the president can say, this particular piece of paper is mine, and the archives has to look at it and has to make a decision to decide whether or not they can have that. And then if they can have that, they go, okay, this doesn't have any value to the archives. It's clearly just, a cooking list of things that, or a list of movies that you and your family wanted to watch. Yeah, go ahead and take that with you. Now, going all the way back to the beginning of last year, during the handover between the Trump administration and the Biden administration, either President Trump himself or members of his retinue moved a whole bunch of documents. And when I say a whole bunch of documents, I do mean like a lot. Boxes of documents. Like those nice, like legal sized boxes that you carry around file folders and stuff with. A lot of stuff down to Mar-a-Lago. And over the course of the following year, so basically the rest of 2021, archives started trying to find certain things that they knew should be there, right? They started going through all of the stuff that the Trump administration had left behind, and they started finding gaps, like, we need to have this thing. Where is this thing? Where's this document? Where's that document? Where's this document? And so they started contacting the Trump administration, or the people that were still in the presidential retinue, because even after you're not president anymore, you still get paid. You still get paid to have a staff. You still get Secret Service details, et cetera, et cetera. And they started contacting people like Trump's lawyers and people that used to work for Trump or people that still work for Trump, and they go, where are these documents? And this is where we start getting into a little bit of, we're not 100% sure yet, but I'll say this, and I might be wrong later, but at this point, it appears that sometime early this year, archives directly contacted them and said, we know that you have this stuff and we need it back. And there were some conversations between President Trump himself, the archives, Trump's lawyers, and some of the Trump transition team. And basically what appears to be the case, this could change, but what appears to be the case is that the Trump administration or Trump himself said, no, we're not going to give you this back. So, earlier this year, back at the end of May and the beginning of June, there was a grand jury called together by the Department of Justice, and this grand jury was presented with a substantial amount of evidence where the archives laid out their case that certain documents would be in the possession of Trump at Mar-a-Lago that should not be there. And the grand jury said, based on the evidence that we have seen, this is the case. You need to, you have like enough evidence to present this to judges, et cetera, et cetera. And at that point in June, there were meetings at Mar-a-Lago between the archives people, Department of Justice, the FBI, and Trump people. And at that point, Trump people turned over about 15 boxes worth of documents. And archives said, okay. And they took that back and they looked through it. Yes, I teach history at college level. I've taught high school before. I've taught junior high and high school. I've even taught elementary school for a very brief period of time. I didn't really care for it. But I do currently teach college. Okay, so at that point, archives looks through all of the stuff that had been turned over. And this apparently did not constitute all of the material that was suspected to be in possession of the Trump administration, or the Trumps in Mar-a-Lago. So at that point, we're getting closer to now. At that point, apparently, archives and the Department of Justice decided that what they needed to do was go get the rest of the documents that had not been turned over, even after they had been cleared to do so and authorized to do so, after the grand jury had seen all the investigation stuff and after they had legal clearance. And apparently, and again, this is just apparently, but it seems to be the case. It might not be. Apparently, the people at the FBI who would be in charge of a lot of this stuff felt that if they announced that they were going to show up directly to retrieve this information, that it might be either hidden or destroyed. So they went to the Department of Justice and said, we need to go get this stuff and we need to get a warrant to go into the premises and search it. So they went to a judge. The judge looked at the evidence. The judge signed off on the warrant. And then they planned all of this stuff so that President Trump would not be at Mar-a-Lago. He was off playing golf in New Jersey. There also weren't going to be a whole bunch of other things going on. Basically, they tried to plan it to where they weren't going to run into a whole bunch of people, right? So they showed up. It was not a raid, right? They didn't like kick the doors down and flashbang the people inside the building. If you see pictures of people walking around that are heavily armed, you also need to remember that Mar-a-Lago is the official residency of the president. So there would be heavily armed Secret Service agents. So you might need to make sure that if you're looking at a picture of somebody with, like an assault rifle, that this isn't a Secret Service agent that would have been there already. The FBI group spoke with President Trump's lawyers. They were shown the warrant and were able to go over that. At that point, the FBI went through all of the particular locations. They had an informant that even told them specifically where certain documents might be located, including a meeting room and a private study. This is the safe that they blew open. They just opened the safe. There were documents inside. After collecting the documents that they needed, they wrote a receipt of all of the stuff that they had taken, and they left that at Mar-a-Lago and in the possession of Trump's lawyers, and then took that information back to the archives. Now, this, of course, is being spun by all sides of the media. Everybody is trying to treat this as something that it probably isn't. It does appear that some of the documents were classified top secret. Some of these documents did have national security issues. Like if this had fallen into the hands of someone else, it could cause significant issues with national security. But we don't know what it is. Of course, the Republicans and those that support Trump have turned this into a situation where the federal government has vastly overstepped their rights, and that this is some jackbooted thuggery, that this was some sort of massively armed invasion, and they keep using the word raid over and over and over again. I mean, they knocked on the door, right? This wasn't some sort of no-knock, middle-of-the-night raid. This was we walked up, we knocked, and we said, hi. Washington Post just released an article that the FBI sought top-secret nuclear documents in the search. Holy crap. Yeah, so maybe there's something there. The last thing that I saw prior to coming on stream was that Merrick Garland, who's the current Attorney General, had just asked for both the warrant and the receipt. Basically, we took this list to be made public. Now, what that means is they're not going to make the individual documents public, right? They're not going to publish nuclear secrets if those are. They'll say stuff like, we took a document that has this. We took a document that contains that, right? They're not going to give the actual stuff out. So on the other side, the Democrats, of course, are turning this into, a fundraising thing where Trump clearly can't be trusted. Some of the people on the Democratic side have already tried to talk about particular clauses in legislation that shows that people who smuggle documents should not be allowed to run for office again. And they're already saying that this is going to disqualify Trump from running for president in 2024. I'm, as usual, probably sitting slightly left of the middle, waiting for the rest of the shoes to fall. I'll be very honest and say that I did not particularly care for the way that President Trump ran the country. He did some things that I liked quite a bit. He did other things that I really don't like, but as a person, I find him reprehensible. And I don't think that let's just be real. Presidents aren't always the best people. But he was not even a good one by that standard. So, didn't the Saudis recently funnel $2 billion to Trump's family or something? I don't know. I don't know anything enough to comment on that. So, since I don't know, I'll probably should just keep my mouth shut. I don't even know allegedly about that one, or apparently about that one. It wouldn't surprise me though. I know that the Saudi Golf League that they just started is having a lot of their golf matches at Trump golf courses, and that could have been something that they paid him $2 billion to do, but I don't know. It was a $2 billion loan to Jared Kushner. Wow. Interesting stuff. Yeah, I had not heard of that. Not necessarily a surprising thing, but not necessarily something that I had heard of either. All right. Any other questions or...
everybody's...
Ooh, no. Questions or point redemptions or anything like that. Otherwise, we might go do a raid. I wonder how much the Saudis would give me for your Wi-Fi password. Probably not much. Yeah, Paladin, you can go ahead. You can ask whatever you want to. Everyone else is very biased. I'm very biased. I mean, I'm a biased individual, but I'll do my best to tell you what we know and what we don't know. I tried to hedge my bets, though, right? I don't know what this is going to turn into being. I mean, this could turn into a whole bunch of political theater where the whole thing was just a big dust up to make Trump look bad, or this could actually be something really, really, really horrible where, you know, you've got nuclear secrets sitting in somebody's living room because they like feeling powerful because they have it. That would not surprise me, considering the fact that I believe that Trump is a narcissist. So, you found a news site that shows the split in media coverage on different stories. Wow. Would the DOJ sign off on a publicity stunt? I would love to say no, but I can't say that conclusively. I could not say that conclusively. I would like to think no, and I think that in this particular case, it probably isn't. The fact that Merrick Garland was involved a lot from the get-go, to me, the fact that he is now basically trying to come out and say, yeah, we need to release all of this stuff, like, to me, that shows that it probably isn't a publicity stunt. Whether or not it is as big of a deal as people are saying is a different story. All right, have I heard about Atlantis in Mauritania? Yeah, so I actually did a History of Atlantis stream, Paladin, and if you want to go back to the viewer request stream collection, let me see which one that was. I can tell you exactly which one it was, because I've got a list. Viewer request number 33 is my History of Atlantis stream. So the Mauritania thing that they're talking about isn't technically in Mauritania. It's technically owned by Morocco, and it's this region called the Spartel Bank. I knew it was right off the coast. Here we go. Yeah. No. That's not it. It's somewhere right around here. And you can see them pretty well. But anyway, there's some islands off the coast of Morocco there where a lot of people say that Atlantis used to be. They were probably flooded during the end of the last ice age. There's a particular event called Meltwater Pulse 1A, if you know anything about that. But it has a lot to do with the way that you particularly interpret those individual... The Richard structure? No, I've never heard of the Richard structure. Let's see what this is. There's Rachat structure. Is that it? Yeah, it's at the end of the Younger Dryas. Well, to me, that looks like a meteorite impact spot. Yeah, that to me looks like a meteorite impact zone. I don't know anything about this though. I mean, we could look it up. Let's go to Richat structure, also called the Guelb or Richat, is a prominent circular geological fixture in Sahara's Adrar Plateau near Ouaddaï in Mauritania, Northwest Africa. It means feather, okay. It is an eroded geological dome exposing sedimentary rock layers, concentric rings. Igneous rock is exposed. Oh, it's got Aquileian. So the Aquileian toolkit is like the second big development in human tool making. This is preceded by the Oldolwyn, which is like the very first hominid toolkit thing. So the Acheulean is pretty old stuff. And if it's got stuff around there, I'm sure everybody's like, well, this is clearly why. It's regarded by geologists as a highly symmetrical geologic dome. As an impact structure was briefly considered, but closer suggested that it was formed by a terrestrial process. Okay, so there's my theory of it being an impact structure being completely blown up as a pun. Yeah, okay, so they're not even finding... So what this is talking about right here, there are particular mineral types that show up with impact, specifically hypervelocity impact, so stuff that's moving faster than sound from space that's super hot. When it hits the Earth, it makes particular types of minerals that you can determine as, evidence of this stuff. The formation of quest house with a differential erosion alternating. Okay, so what they're suggesting here is that this is basically multiple layers of crustal patterns that have been stacked on top of each other in the circular pattern, and the erosion is actually what's exposing it. But I'm not even seeing Atlantis pop up on this page, though. But that doesn't mean that it's not cool. I've never heard of that before. It just occurred to me that Meteor Crater in Arizona... Yeah, pretty much. You think it's a volcano, like inland... maybe. But if it was a volcano, they'd be able to tell. They would be able to see geologically underground if that were the case. Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to throw it on the Discord. There's a video page, photos and videos on Discord. If you want to find one, I'd be happy to watch it. So just as a basic overview, I am actually fairly okay with myths being containers of grains of truth. And I'm perfectly okay with learning a lot from things that people have recorded way back in history. But I don't think that there was a single island that had a whole bunch of people living in great harmony under the gods. And honestly, a lot of the Atlantis myth that people think about, like the hyper technology stuff like that, that isn't even in the ancient Atlantis mythology. That doesn't really show up until a lot later, like the 1800s. Originally, Atlantis was just a group of people who had been blessed by the gods, and they lived in harmony because they followed the gods' rules, and they were super peaceful and plentiful and bountiful, and then they got destroyed because they screwed up and made the gods mad. I think what is contained in Atlantis, in the Atlantis myths, is actually a story of early human expansion that happened during the internecine period between the first peak of the Younger Dryas and the second peak of the Younger Dryas, where there were really massive amounts of catastrophic change on the surface of the Earth. And I think that it wiped out a whole bunch of very early human cultures, and the survivors remember that because it did happen very, very rapidly. At one point at the end of the Younger Dryas, the average temperature of Earth increased 7 degrees Fahrenheit in the span of about a decade, which is ridiculous. It would have absolutely wrecked the entire climate of the Earth. We know that there were massive amounts of flooding going on at this period of time. So I've covered historical theories of Atlantis. I've never actually done Shane's theory of Atlantis, but that's a whole other story. Before we leave, I saw Vipers mention needing a topic for our next viewer request stream. So I do have a list, and I would like to go down them for people that might be able to purchase a viewer request stream. Do we have Metrand in chat? Metrand, are you here? I don't see Metrand in the list. JMR, are you still around? JMR Killer, are you in the list? What about David? David Peterson, are you in the list? I'm going down my list of people that have asked to buy viewer request streams. Or Kidoki, Lumpy Dragon Potato, art thou still around? If you are on that list, make your voice heard. Otherwise, we'll go do a vote, which is perfectly okay as well. Yeah, put the video in the server. Cool, thanks. I'll give it a shot. Alright, I need to go to dashboard, and it looks like we'll just do ourselves a poll. How about that? That's okay. Okay. So here's what's about to happen. I am in the process of making a poll. And this is going to be for our next viewer request stream. And what I'm about to do in just a second is ask you for your concepts of what you would like to talk about on a viewer request stream. And it can be anything that is honest and logical that I can potentially get an episode out of. And if you are in the chat, you can suggest. You don't have to be subbed, or you don't even have to be followed. You can just be in the chat. What say you all? What do you want to talk about on our next viewer request stream? You've got 10K and a topic that you can tentatively use unless one of the others shows up next time. The Queens of Merode. We've talked about them a little bit already, but we could talk about them again. Nelson Mandela. One more. Is that what you wanted to talk about, Vipers? Is Nelson Mandela? I mean, we could put it on the list. Well, how about we put it on the list and we'll see what happens. And then if not, you can buy it and we'll do it the next time. All right, so we need one more potential. So we've got Marco Polo. Marco Polo was number 2 in the last thing, and we rolled him over. It could be whatever you want to be, Paladin, just whatever you think would be interesting. And Moose hits us with the Third Crusade. All right, so here's what's going to happen. I've just hit start a poll, and if you are in the sound of my voice, you can vote. So above you in chat, there's a little arrow that you click, and you can vote on whatever you want. And the witch skull rat whistle from the 1800s. Wow. I I'm not 100% certain I know what that is. Witch skull rat whistle. Let me give that a Google. I don't know if we could get an entire stream out of... Oh, that's wicked. Everybody should be voting right now, though. Everybody go vote. In the chat, if you are listening to me, you can vote. You don't have to be a sub. You don't have to be a follower. If you're in the room, you can vote. Everybody gets to go vote. Go and do your votes. 2, 4, 5, 6. We've got 6. That's like not even a third of the people in the room right now. So everybody can go vote. Go forth and vote. Do your thing. Make your voices heard. Welcome, LC2500, by the way. That's a pretty wicked thing, and I'll show it here on the screen in just a second when we get done voting. I just want to make sure that everybody goes and votes. You don't know how we're going to get a whole stream of playing Marco Polo outside of a pool. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Got about half the people. So we've talked about the Kingdom of Mali before, and we did talk about Mansa Musa. So Mansa is the title there. Musa is his name. So yeah, we've talked about Empire of Mali before. So everybody gets to go vote. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A little bit more than half of the people have voted. The rest of you can still go vote. Yeah, so we've done like 50 something. We've done 61 viewer requests. We've done the Maya, Vlad the Impaler, Inca people, leprosy, the Khmer Empire, Mongolian Empire, Celtic peoples, books and printings, gates to the underworld, the KGB, metallurgy, mound cultures, astrology, industrial revolution, history of cheese, which was interesting. We've done samurai, Norse migration to America, history of scary stories, the Contra people in Nicaragua. We've done the mafia, Native American mythology, Japanese mythology, pirates, Australian colonialization, sub-Saharan African peoples, history of archaeology, adventure photos where I basically just showed pictures for the entire time. Famous people from Florence, Nazi occultism. We've done 3 different installments on the history of Israel as a state, electricity, Atlantis, Japanese, Edo period culture and art, Meiji Restoration, Manhattan Project, Rasputin, end of the world predictions, Empire of Mali, medieval Poland, Nazis trying to get outside of Germany after World War II, the First Crusade, the Second Crusade, the Federal Reserve, history of police, Ivan the Terrible, the Talmud, Weimar Germany, the origins of Germanic peoples, the Highland clearances in Scotland, the Troubles, another photo stream, Pliny the Elder, East Germany, police state stuff like with the Stasi, Reconstruction in the United States South, and Swedish Empire was the most recent one. And now we'll be doing, I missed the polls results, the Queens of Meroe. So Meroe's a kingdom in the upper Nile. Down here, a kingdom that was basically completely run by women for several generations. Pretty neat stuff. The AD time period be pretty interesting. Yes, we did history of cheese. I was just going down the list. Did you talk about Oak Island? No, I haven't. I don't. It would be kind of hard to do a whole stream on Oak Island. It might just be the history of people wasting money on Oak Island. So this is the witch whistle death skull rat foot thing that got brought up in chat by LC2500. That is a really wicked looking artifact. I don't actually know what this is, but that's pretty freaking weird. I don't know what I would do with that. Perhaps summon some sort of demon or something. Dude, I don't know. That it's a weird looking thing. It's a weird look. Thank you, LC, for sharing that. I had no idea what that was, but that's really cool to look at. All right, Vipers, do you want to go ahead and buy Nelson Mandela? If so, I will make that happen. Alrighty then. There you go, Vipers. Buy away, my friend. That will actually save some time in the future. Nix, I can put you on the list. I usually only take one purchase at a time. But you are now on the list. I do know Ibn Battuta. So next time we get to the point of buying, I'll do the same thing that I did here. I'll just call people's names out, and if you're on the list, you'll get called, and then you can buy it. So I don't like holding on to people's points, right? Because you might spend all of your points and then have to wait like a month to see stuff, you know, and then you can't like interact and do stuff with your points. I don't like to be the Federal Reserve. I don't want you to give me money and then me have to give it back to you and then all that fun stuff. Not the Federal Reserve, the IRS, sorry. Okay, yes, you're on the list now. You have 82 points. Please take them. That's a lot of points. We need to have a community goal then. If people have that many points just sitting around, I need to figure out a community goal and let some people burn some of those off. Go to the Discord and come up with, in stream chat, try to come up with some interesting ideas that we could do as a community goal. So something really very different, not like just a regular viewer request stream. Things that we've done for community goals in the past. We've done like all photo streams where all I do is just sit here and show pictures. We've done We Didn't Start the Fire, where I went through the song We Didn't Start the Fire and like talked about all of that stuff. 100% viewer questions, so that's like a full, that we could do that. One thing that I thought about was a stream of nothing but standard question book. But 100% viewer question stream, like where you just pepper me with whatever questions you want. We could do that. Yeah, that sounds like a good one. You're going to use them all in one stream. Just like nothing but Shane's opinion stream. I'm sure people would watch that, but I don't know if people would like that or not. My opinions get a little annoying sometimes, I feel. All right, where are we going to go raid? Where have we not raided in a bit? Let's go raid the damage. We haven't raided the damage in a minute. You've got 13K. You want a 100% opinion hat stream. You almost added Shane McInnes to the poll. The Voynich manuscript. I do know what the Voynich manuscript is. I wish we could interpret what all was written in there. It would be really cool. That's one of like the hidden things in history. There are a lot of people actually in the last couple of years that have scanned all of the Voynich manuscript pages into computers, and they're trying to get AI to crack what the stuff means. So that's really interesting. The history of Shane McInnes. That'd be a horrible stream. Shane rants on whatever he wants to. All of these are great ideas, and we might make all of them goals. I like to make sure that I have something for you to spend your points on. I don't like the idea of people necessarily having like a bajillion points and they feel like they can't do anything. The History of Ancient Aliens, it's 18 seasons long. So I could probably get a whole bunch of content out of that. But it's a long stream for me. We've gone like 37 minutes longer than I normally do, but that's okay because we've had good content and good talk. But let's go raid the Damage. He's a great artist, a good guy. He knows a lot of history stuff. He's done some raids over here before, so we're going to go see Damage. When we get there, our battle cry is Adventure. You can shout that however you would desire. And if you have those lovely, lovely adventure hat emotes, if you throw those in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated. So the next time you will definitely see me is next Thursday. There's a chance that if I get my act together, we might slip in a secret or sneaky, unexpected viewer request stream on Tuesday. I don't necessarily see that happening because I have to go back to work next week. But we'll see. Who knows? Maybe the Queens of Miro is a really easy put together stream, and we have one on Tuesday, but don't bank on that. Otherwise, I will see you all then. I hope you all have a great weekend and a great rest of next week as well. Take care of yourselves. Thank you very much for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.